What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a video about the channel and how it's doing, as Halloween, happy Halloween by the way, just so happens to also be the channel's anniversary. Mortismal Gaming is officially 8 years old today, as I started the channel on 2015 on Halloween Day. So, in spirit of that, I thought it would be fun to sort of have a conversation, talk about some of the ways the channel started, how it's been going, where things are going, as it's not something I often take time to do, given that I usually try to keep the focus pretty primarily on video games. But 2023 has been a tremendous year for the channel and video game releases as a whole, which is interesting because beyond just those releases, there's been a lot of turmoil in the background of the industry, I would say, with something like 6,000 employees being laid off this year across a wide variety of companies. But mostly what I want to talk about here is the channel itself. So, 8 years ago today, I founded this channel because I was working a job that I hated. I was living completely on my own. My son wasn't born yet, another 4 years before that happened, and pretty much all I did was work, go home, play some video games with the little time I had, and then go to sleep and go back to work. And at that point in my life, I really just needed an outlet to let me perform some kind of creativity, at which point I went on to run a YouTube channel very, very poorly. A lot of those videos are not good for those who like going back and watching that stuff, but nonetheless, I took that risk, I stuck with it over, again, 6 years, and eventually got better and better before a few different factors finally aligned just so that allowed me to jump into this full time, and now we are here. So going from a channel that used to just talk about the MMOs I was playing at the time to a channel that covered Divinity lore almost extensively, which is where I would say I really got my foot in the door, then moving on to covering my love of CRPGs as a whole before morphing that into reviews still. It has been a pretty incredible journey, I would say, and I kind of wanted to just talk about that alongside some of my favorite moments from this year and what I'd like to do in the future and where I see things going. So for me, looking back at all the videos I used to make, it's especially funny to start looking at the ones from the first couple years I was running the channel because I was actually still pretty into MMOs at the time. I played quite a few different ones, and I made some content based around a lot of that, and while none of them were particularly good, as I still wasn't very good at editing or anything like that, it is interesting looking back for me because I'm reminded that in many ways the MMOs at that time were kind of my social outlet that wasn't just work, really. I could jump online, talk to a bunch of people, even play a few MMOs with my friends who also played. But in a story that is not so unique to me, MMOs eventually kind of lost their luster on me, and I think that's for a variety of reasons. For starters, when I play games, I like to do everything, as you might imagine, with the reviews after 100%, and with MMOs, there's never truly an end. And it always gets to a point where playing MMOs tends to just feel like work to me, especially since many of them are simply designed to keep you playing, and eventually I got to a point where I would just much rather be able to play a game, do everything there is to do, and be like, alright, that game is done. I might circle back to it in a couple years, but I've done what there is to do, I can move on. And doing that and approaching games that way ultimately led me here as well, but it also allows me to experience many more games because playing games in that manner is something I've pretty much always done, and for a long time it was just because I didn't feel like I was getting my money out of them otherwise, but over the years the side benefit of that is just getting to experience so many games and what they had to offer. And while I wouldn't know it at the time, that would become the cornerstone of the channel later. Now, when I stopped playing MMOs so much, I was just kind of looking for more video games to play, as they were still very much so my passion, and that's when Divinity Original Sin 2 released, and I thought it looked really cool, so I picked it up, and playing through that game reminded me that, oh yeah, CRPGs are a thing that I haven't played in years. Whatever happened to that genre? Because I've been so busy with life, I kind of just forgot about it. And in particular, I loved Divinity Original Sin 2 so much that I was like, I need to play every Divinity game. I need to know everything there is to know about this series. And in the process of doing that, I very quickly learned that when it comes to a reliable source for Divinity as a series, there just really wasn't anything at the time, and I was like, this is it. This is the thing I can do that I don't think anyone else is doing to sort of catalog this information as I learn about it with something that I'm really passionate about. And I turned that into this whole lore series for Divinity, which is still on the channel. I'm very proud of those videos. I eventually just kind of ran out of things to talk about and started shifting gears during and after that time time to other CRPGs, which is what ultimately led me to start covering the Pathfinder games, because I had played Pathfinder and D&D 3.5 during high school, which is something I enjoyed a great deal, and then that morphed into covering Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, which was a similar situation to Divinity. It was a game that there was clearly an audience for, like people wanted to learn about it. I could see that by looking up videos and just CRPGs in general, but nobody was really covering those games in a way that provided anything meaningful. And while Baldur's Gate 3 is on everyone's mind right now, a couple years ago even, that was very much so not the case. The fact that BG3 might win Game of the Year legitimately a couple years ago even was just unthinkable, as the genre was very niche. But as they proved with Original Sin 2, Larian Studios has done a good job of proving that there is a lot of attention and an audience as a whole to be gained from that genre. And as somebody who's passionate about that stuff, I love to see it. But Wrath of the Righteous was where I got to cover all these mechanics and things. And I actually backed the Kickstarter for that game, as I tend to do with games I think would be really cool. And that came with all sorts of things like beta access and whatnot. So I used that access to make a ton of YouTube videos, cataloging and covering mechanics as they evolved and changed. And while I was still definitely getting my footing at this time, so those videos aren't amazing or anything, I'm still really, really proud of them, because I would say that's where the channel started to really blow up. In fact, it was the launch of Wrath of the Righteous that propelled the channel into a position to actually allow me to do this full time. But just a few months, I would say, before the launch of that game, I started dabbling a little bit in reviews. I was like, man, I'm playing all these games. I'm doing like everything there is to do. Maybe I should try to offer my opinions on them, because nobody else seems to be covering CRPGs in this way. And because of that, I started just reviewing all these games that I was getting 100% on anyways. And obviously, people have really, really responded to that. So what started as just a channel talking about MMOs and then Divinity lore and then CRPGs has turned into largely a big review channel. I would say that's what I'm known for more than anything. And while I do make guides and things that people really enjoy because it just makes sense to do them at the same time, I'm especially proud of a few new players guides I've made over the years, but it's wild to consider the twists and turns that this journey has taken for me. And that's to say nothing of all the things I learned and picked up on along the way, how best to edit videos for what I want them to be, how to record and edit audio properly so it actually sounds pretty decent, a lot of which was actually done with the help of people commenting and talking me through it, which led me to meet some pretty cool people, including the person who made the intro music for the channel, whose website is linked down below if you'd like to go see it. In just a few short conversations, that person taught me so much about audio editing over the course of just a few YouTube comments, which was really cool to see. But that's where the channel has been, so let's talk about where we are now. 2023 is by far my biggest year ever, and it is not even close. Baldur's Gate 3 in particular has really catapulted the channel's viewership and numbers into the stratosphere in many ways. I made a tremendous amount of money off the launch of that game, covering it in depth, making all these videos and guides, trying to cover it as thoroughly as possible. And in many ways, I actually took a lot of the lessons I learned about how I was covering CRPGs previously and applied them to these videos on the lead up to the launch of BG3. That was pretty effective, I would say. But an interesting thing about seeing all that happen is that I would also say it highlights the highs and lows of doing YouTube full time, because the month before the BG3 launch and the build up and everything, things were going pretty slow because there wasn't a lot of game releases, with only like 1 or 2 a month. So while things were steady and I was doing well, it was just kind of slow, I would say. And then BG3 happened, and then Starfield, and then Cyberpunk re-review. I had an insane couple of months, and now towards the end of the year, where again there's fewer releases, things are just going a little more slowly. And while I cover older games in between those things, I think it's important to mention that even now at this level, doing YouTube full time is a bit of a roller coaster. There are months where you're doing just okay, and then there's months that are tremendous, and then it slows back down, and sometimes that can be a little anxiety inducing, and you just kind of have to work your way through it. But throughout all of that, I will say that I have been doing incredibly well all year, even during the slow parts, in large part thanks to the people watching and contributing via liking, commenting, sharing these videos, places, that kind of thing. So even during those slow months, I was very financially secure, and that is just incredible to me to be able to get to do this for a living in a way that doesn't have me stressed out all the time, and I try to make the most of that. I upload as much as I possibly can. If anything, people are always telling me to slow down and take a breather, but if people are going to give me the support I need to make this a living, I really feel like I need to do my best to give people as much as I can back, which is a bit of the reasoning behind the pretty much non-stop work I put into this channel. So for where the channel is at right now, like I said, I'm doing the best I have ever done. In fact, YouTube this past year has been the biggest year I have ever had personally. It is the most money I have ever made, and I get to make that money doing the thing that I love to do the most. So in that way, I couldn't be happier, and that is entirely because of the people watching, commenting, liking, and again, I just cannot thank people enough for that. So as for where the channel is right now, that's pretty much it. I'm trying to, as much as possible, review all the games I want to check out and play, share them with people, make sure they have a good resource about what to expect from a game they want to buy, make guides and things for the games I want to play, because getting to talk about games like this is, simply put, the best thing that's ever happened to me. Next to my son being born, of course. So as it stands, I'm just trying to make hay while the sun is shining, as they say, and before I move on to talking about the future of things, I thought it would be fun to interject a portion of this video talking about my favorite moments over the course of this journey and the past year, really. And to kick that off, I think I would say my favorite moment of the channel, period, so far was simply the decision to start doing it full time and sort of taking that leap, because at the time I was just terrified of it. Like, the numbers were there, other factors outside of YouTube were also a big deciding factor, as well as things outside of YouTube just kind of lined up, but it was still a big risk. Obviously, YouTube is volatile even as far as jobs go, and while other jobs are also certainly volatile, it felt like a big risk, and ultimately I decided it was essentially now or never, so I decided to take that leap, and I'm glad I did, because obviously it turned out incredibly well, and it's a decision I'm proud of myself for having made, because I did agonize over it for a couple of weeks. Another bit of this journey that I'm really proud of is actually the big new player's guides that I've made over the years. I've made a few of these, especially for older CRPGs like the Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 series, Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, and I'm proud of those videos in particular because of how many people they've helped get into this genre of games that I love so much. And while I obviously love doing my reviews and everything, when I talk about the things I'm most proud of on this channel, it's always those guides, because seeing people be able to get into older games that I love and just games that are hard to get into in general because of those videos means the world to me. Another one of my favorite moments was actually my Forspoken review, because while that isn't a game I wound up recommending, I'm really proud of the way I managed to capture what that game did well on top of the things it did poorly, because when that game released, everyone was really caught up in the conversation around its dialogue and things like that, and I was able to make a review that showcased the entire game as opposed to these little 20-second clips that really didn't tell the full story. And that's something I try to do with basically every game I cover now as a result, which means games that people aren't particularly fond of or aren't enjoying, such as something like Redfall, I really try to make sure that I also capture the things that those games do well, and I also, on the other end of that spectrum, try to cover the things about the games I love that they don't do well, in an effort to provide some constructive criticism that they might continue to grow and improve. And in a media landscape where things are often pushed as either universally amazing or universally terrible, I think making a point to try to talk about the good and the bad of a video game, whether you liked it or not, is increasingly important when it comes to the conversation around reviews in particular. So because of that, I'm really proud of things like that. And outside of those things, I would say to end off this section with, just so I'm not here all day, but there are many other things that I really enjoyed over the years, such as the Wrath of the Righteous launch, or more recently, just all the coverage and everything I was able to do for Baldur's Gate 3. Nonetheless, the thing I want to leave this section off with is one of the favorite things I've done with this channel is manage to create, with obviously a huge help from you, the viewers, a community around this sort of niche genre of games, mostly CRPGs, alongside its related genres like RPGs in general, let's be honest, but also TRPGs and all sorts of other games like that that I really enjoy. And being able to create such a wonderful community to talk about exactly those things is really incredible remarkable to see. I love scrolling down into my comment section and seeing people have conversations about these games, and seeing this channel become a place for people to have those discussions and a place where people go to find out about games they might not know about might just be the most remarkable thing this channel ever accomplishes. But obviously we're not done yet, so I wanted to end this video by talking a little bit about the future, because while I am certainly not omniscient, if life has taught me anything, it is that nothing lasts forever. Nothing stays the same forever. So what does the future look like? What does it hold? What are my plans for it? Essentially right now, my plans are to do this for as long as I possibly can, and if it ever gets to a point or things change to a point where I can no longer do this full time, still continue to make videos. I did this for 6 years, essentially unpaid, so no matter what the future holds, as long as I can continue to make videos, regardless of the money I make off of them, I will continue to do so. Because it is what I am most passionate about. It is an outlet that I really don't think I could do without anymore. But to state the obvious, as long as this is paying me enough to pay all my bills, I will continue to make reviews and guides and everything at a pretty much breakneck pace, with the added benefit of experience and things like that, showing me how best to approach those things, learning ways to adapt and structure videos and give people as much of that information as they're looking for that I can possibly make. That said, YouTube is full of ups and downs, and while everything is going exceptionally well right now, I have learned in my lifetime to always plan for the future, because as someone who used to be homeless once upon a time, things change and nothing lasts forever. So while I don't anticipate much changing, at least in the immediate future, hopefully for another year or two at least, it's not lost on me that things might, especially when we start looking at the industry as a whole. You see all these things like mass layoffs, unsustainable business models at the AAA level, all of which fills me with a certain degree of, I would say, uncertainty as to the future of games, what that looks like, what mediums or hardware it might wind up flourishing on. It is almost certainly going to continue to change and evolve. And while I'm not really worried about gaming in general, obviously, as I think video games in some form or fashion will always be made, but my point in telling you all that is simply that while video games and the industry as a whole might change and evolve, they are and likely always will be my passion. They are the thing that I want to do pretty much most of all. It's what I want to build my career on. So regardless of any future changes to the industry or external factors such as the many other more broad issues facing the world these days, whether it is as my full-time job or an unpaid hobby, I'm going to continue to cover them and talk about them as long as I am able to do so in any capacity that I am able to do so in, because sharing that passion with others and getting to participate in this community that I've built around this means more to me than I really have words for. So come what may in the future, whether it's for 5 views or 5 million, I'm going to be here making content, and I certainly hope you stick around to see it. So if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe so that other people might see it yet. And with that in mind, I'd love to hear about anything you've particularly enjoyed in gaming this year, how you feel about the channel, or just anything else you'd like to share, really. But regardless of all that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.